Welcome everybody to Inside LA. My name is Trudy, and I'm the founding teacher here. It started with nothing, actually. We had a sitting group. I always say there were two people, Fred and Steve, and then Fred wrote to me one day and said, actually, there were three of us. So, but we started with a very tiny, tiny sitting group 23 years ago now. And yeah, very tiny sitting group 23 years ago. And now I'm 80 years old. I have stepped back. I teach here occasionally, but I don't run things anymore. But look, here we are, still up and running and has gone through many changes, including sort of a death and resurrection. And that's what I want to talk about this morning, not so much resurrection, but death and dying. And uh, the promise of this practice is that it will help us prepare for our death and dying. And those of you who are here who are young are probably just rolling your eyes and thinking, yeah, that's because she's 80. She's interested in that. This really does not pertain to me. But it does. It does, because it has to do with how we live our lives so that we can look back on our lives when you're my age, that you can look back on your lives and say, actually, I respect it, mistakes and all. They were understandable, but basically I respect what I did in my life. And that's what you really want, because that is what will allow each one of us, when the time comes, to die peacefully, if not willingly, at least peacefully. It's not just the dying of this body and this person that you are and that I am. We have to die to times of our life. I loved where I was living, and then my landlady wanted it back after 13 years. I kind of thought it was mine after all that time, but guess what? It was her house, her little cottage. We die to so many things, losses that we have. Some of you may have had your houses burned down this year. I mean, not just losses of pets and loved ones, and not that our pets aren't loved ones. And so I think these kinds of practices are applicable to all the transitions that we go through in our lives where it feels like we are really losing something. And of course, that makes room for something else to be born. And when people would tell me that during a breakup, I would get so upset and angry. Like, I am grieving. Don't tell me that this is making room for something new. I'm sorry. Nothing good is ever going to happen to me again. And you need to understand that. That's the mind of grief. We're exploring one of the most profound and challenging aspects of our human existence, and how can we bring mindfulness and awareness to our mortality? And again, the young people here, you might be feeling like, oh gosh, why did I come this morning? But it's no guarantee. Just recently, one of our beloved Inside LA teachers lost her daughter, who was in her 30s and a beautiful, beautiful being. So it's not an easy topic, and there's no guarantee, and it's something that touches each one of us. And the hard thing, too, is that we don't know. We don't know when we're going to die. A friend of mine once said she wished we could buy, like, those lottery cards with a scratch, then you scratch to get the number, and then that would tell you what your date is. And then you'd know like how much you have to save of your money and how much, you just have a sense of how to plan things. But then again, might not be so great to know that. But we really don't know. I remember one day when I was a psychotherapist in Cambridge, one of my clients came in and she happened to earn her living as a psychic reader. She was seeing me for some early childhood trauma, but often people who have very early childhood trauma do develop other capacities. And anyway, she came in that day and she was crying. And she said, I'm just so scared something's going to happen to you. And I just laughed and I said, I am so healthy and I'm so strong. I would have to get hit by a car. That night, when I left the office, it was raining, it was January. My car was across the street and I went to the crosswalk and I pulled up my rain jacket hood and I'm walking across the crosswalk. And all I remember seeing is the headlights. A car made a left turn into me and my body went flying. And it is true, everything slows down. The first, you have the body has a reaction of just like, no, like every cell of our bodies wants to live and wants to survive. And it was just like, no. But then when I was sailing slowly, it seemed, through the air, I thought, this is like Mary Poppins. I actually thought that. And then I thought, you can think something so funny when you're about to die. And then I thought, no, not like this. I thought I would be surrounded by loved ones in my bed, not in the street. The mind, you can think a lot of thoughts really quickly. Um, anyway, I landed and then it was awful. And I won't go into all the details, except to say that while I was waiting for the ambulance and my concerned neighbors and the sobbing man who had hit me, um, I had an out of the body experience. And I tell you this because it's kind of like the exercise we just did. I was way up high looking down at these Boston triple deckers. And my body down there and everybody. And at that time, all I felt was like this huge compassion for the whole situation, for everybody in it, my worried neighbors, me, and the guy who hit me. That changed later. But in that moment, I just felt huge compassion. And I heard a voice, and the voice said, and I do not hear voices. I want you to know that. But this time I did hear a voice, and the voice said, we couldn't prevent the accident, but we cushioned your fall. Later, when I got to the hospital, I had a lot of broken bones and injuries of all kinds. But I had landed on my back. So my back was very injured and broken pelvis, broken leg, broken knee, a lot of things. And then everywhere the car hit broke. But if you can just picture, you fall, your head would hit, right? Not a bruise, not a scratch, nothing. So that was mysterious. I still don't understand it. There's so many things in this life that we do not understand. And many of you have had your own experiences of things like this, where you know exactly when a loved one passes away, even though you're not together. You might even be geographically pretty far apart. So that is just to illustrate that your life can change on a dime really fast. And we don't know, we don't have a scratch card telling, but anyway, obviously I didn't die. I'm very happy about that because I get to be here with you today. But our mindfulness practice is so helpful. It's helpful to me in my recovery. It's helpful because then we can understand that our mortality, the finiteness of this life and being here, is actually studying it, contemplating it, reflecting on it, doing, exercises of leaving this body. We do all of this not to terrify ourselves and make us anxious so we can't sleep at night. We do it so that actually the opposite, so that we really appreciate the moments we have and the breaths that we have and the friends that we have and the sangha, the community that we have here, so that everything can be more vivid and clear and immediate. And the Buddha was really clear, you don't want to die with attachments to things. That feels like a tall order, but then he talked about the one fortunate attachment. And the one fortunate attachment, do you know? It's to this moment, this present moment. Just be in it, this moment. And being in this moment is actually the best way to prepare for the time when we have to let go of our life and ourself. And I just remember, when Ram Dass turned 80, we were very good friends by then, and I had got to have a bunch of alone time with him because I would do personal retreat in the Ohana right next to his house. And he would, his caregivers would roll him over in his wheelchair and we would have a chance to talk about things. But he really devoted a lot of his life after 80 to studying teachings about death and dying and reflecting. And he had a lot of ideas about what would happen after you die. But all of that, really, the Buddha said, I mean, you can do that, but the most important study is this moment. The most important study is being present in this moment. And also, being a basic good person so that you don't die having huge regrets because, oh, I shouldn't have killed that person or I shouldn't have stolen that. You really, it's in the end, all these fancy teachings, the Bardo teachings in Tibetan Buddhism, and they really come down to just live a good life so that you can feel respect for your life when your time comes, and also have the courage to uh, to to face what was happening. I watched with my parents. My mom could not face what was happening. She was in complete denial, even though she knew that she had metastatic cancer. She had melanoma, and before I think now there's treatments, but we were having lunch once with another meditation teacher friend of mine, Sharon Salzberg, and I had to go out and I had to move the car or something, and so Sharon was alone with my mom, who Sharon told me later that my mom said to her, "If I thought my tumors were growing, I would be really spooked." Well, they were, but she never allowed herself to think that, and that was her protection, denial. But when the time actually came, it was scary for her. And I had to support her denial. I felt it was the compassionate thing to do by just reassuring her that she was going to be fine and so forth. And then I watched my dad, who had an aneurysm, which can happen to you anytime. He was 77. He was totally healthy and tan. And it was like watching an oak tree be in a hospital bed. It was so incongruous. And after 2 weeks in a coma, we had to make a decision about withdrawing him from life support. And nobody in the family could make that decision. Not my mom, nobody. I'm the oldest. So that next morning, I snuck into the ICU when it wasn't visiting hours and asked him, because I know people are supposed to be able to hear when they're in a coma. And I asked him, do you want us to help you go? You have to give me a sign because this is really hard. And my father, who had not budged or opened his eyes, or, he was in a coma, raised his arm like this. So he had courage. He knew what was happening. He gave us that gift of permission to let him go. And I feel like, having the courage to do that, you might think, oh, that was a lot of courage. I don't have courage. You do have courage. You might not think of yourself that way. You might not apply that word to yourself, but just to live in this life and get up every day and do your job and whatever it is and take care of your family or your friends or whoever needs care requires courage. And you have that courage. And I think it's really important to remind ourselves because I don't know, I don't sit around thinking I have courage. You probably don't either. But we do. We do. Coming here, it's a beautiful beach day. You're here. That also takes courage because you don't just come here for, I guess there's some refreshments out there. I always arrive at the very last minute, so I didn't get to see, but you don't just come here for the snacks, you come here for nourishment of a different kind, and you come here because you want to deepen and strengthen your practice of awareness and of love. Mindfulness gives us the energy to do this. And and then courage, takes us the rest of the way. In Buddhist understanding, consciousness does not end with death. a lot of us Western teachers avoid the teachings about rebirth because nobody can prove it at all. Nobody's come back to tell us. And so we just kind of don't address that part so much, if at all. But I remember asking my Zen teacher, Maureen Stewart Roshi, who I studied with from the time I met her till the end of her life, from 1979 to 1990. And I remember asking her, what about rebirth? Do you believe in rebirth? And she said, oh, yes, yes. Like, I was interested. She was a musical prodigy, and she was studying piano at the age of 3, with little hands, and she became a concert pianist. She played in Carnegie Hall. And Maureen said, I knew things in music when I was a toddler. I knew things there was no way I could have known. Another mystery, we don't know. We don't know. I just know from sitting with people at the end of their lives, from having had actually several near-death experiences. My sister's like, how many lives do you have? But I've been so far, I come back. So, but, dying is the most profound mystery and the most profound uncertainty. I talked about a year and a half ago when I had a near-death experience and the peacefulness of it, incredible peacefulness of it. Yes, I was in pain. Yes, I was terribly ill, but it was just this quiet, gentle sinking into, felt like sort of a velvety, just soft, dark, vast, empty place of peace. So there are many things that, actually, I just want to pause for a minute because I have piles of things to share with you, and I want to focus on what I most want to share with you. So just a moment. I'll tell you another story. When my daughter was 2 years old, 2.5, we were living in Geneva, Switzerland, where I was in graduate school studying at Jean Piaget, he was a developmental psychologist of the last century, a towering figure. And I, at that time, had not met the Dharma. We didn't have Buddhist books and things like everybody has now. And I was looking for something, and kind of like a seeker without a church. I didn't know what I was looking for. And I thought Piaget, who had written about the origins of intelligence and sort of how the mind works, I thought he'll know what I need to know. So I was in his program, and my dad worked for the World Health Organization, so my parents were there, and I was newly divorced. 24-year-old single mom when my daughter came down with the most virulent form of bacterial meningitis, and the doctors told me she was dying. And she was in a coma for about 8 days, and her veins would keep collapsing because she was so teeny. And during one time when she coded, which is an emergency when doctors and nurses come running to help, they were all working on, and I was very fortunate because this was, let's see, she's going to be 58. So this was 56, 55 years ago. And it was before it was understood that parents needed to stay near their little ones in the hospital. But I was really lucky that I was allowed to have a bed in her room. And I was sitting on the bed watching the doctors and nurses working on this little body in a hospital bed. They didn't even bother to shoo me away. They were just focused on her. And I was numb with fear, of course, terrified, just sitting there, helpless. And suddenly everything shifted in that room. Everything shifted. And I saw, this always makes me cry. I saw God. I felt like I've seen God. Like God was not up there in the sky or in a synagogue or a temple or a mosque or a kiva. Or God was in the activity of compassion of those healthcare workers, those doctors and nurses saving my daughter's life, which they did. And yeah, I have grandchildren. She's fine. But that experience of witnessing that and not having any way to understand that was actually part of what led me to find the Dharma and find these teachings. And also, I tell you this because these experiences were so real. And I feel like it's really these moments of intense suffering that we have in our lives. It could be the suffering of childbirth. It could be the suffering of being with somebody who's dying, being injured yourself, whatever it is, a terrible heartbreak. These moments of suffering, they push us against the wall. The times when we feel the less courageous, they just push us up against it. And that's when something often opens. We have an insight. We have what's called the gift of desperation in the 12-step program, where, you're driven into your practice. My very first teacher, the Korean Zen teacher, Sansanim, De Sansanim, he used to tell us a good situation is a bad situation. We're like, a bad situation is a good situation. He didn't have, really eloquent English, so he made these great Dharma sound bites. But what he meant was when things are going really well and we're really happy and it's a beautiful beach day and that's where we're going to go in the afternoon, and maybe we aren't going to be meditating so much, but when things are really hard, then we turn to our practice. And that's what he meant, that a bad situation is a good situation. And it doesn't mean that we want to have bad situations and trouble. But in our minds, death is always in our future. And that's true for me too. It's in my future. It's not right now. As much as I do these practices and share them with you, it's always in the future. And in the Mahabharata, which is the longest epic poem in the world, the Bhagavad Gita is part of that. This is often called the eighth wonder of the world, that all around us, we see people dying, but somehow deep down, we don't really think it's going to happen to us. We just don't. It's them. It's that. It's the future. It's over there. It's the same thing with our awakening. We make it a story about the future instead of realizing we're practicing right now, you all. It's right now. This is it. We're very awake. And understanding that this day may be our last, this breath may be our last, this teaching may be my last, this community sit may be your last. It really does. I think it really does help us appreciate. Just help us appreciate. So I want to share a poem with you. And then another practice. And then time for you. This is a poem by Billy Collins called The Afterlife. I have shared it before. While you're preparing for sleep, brushing your teeth or riffling through a magazine in bed, the dead of the day are setting out on their journey. They are moving off in all imaginable directions, each according to their own private belief. And this is the secret. Everyone is right, as it turns out. You go to the place you always thought you would go, the place you kept lit in an alcove in your head. Some are being shot up a funnel of flashing colors into a zone of light, white as a January sun. Others are standing naked before a forbidding judge who sits with a golden ladder on one side, a coal chute on the other. Some have already joined the celestial choir and are singing as if they've been doing this forever, while the less imaginative find themselves stuck in a big air-conditioned room full of food and chorus girls. Some are approaching the apartment of the female god. With one eye, she regards the dead through a hole in her door. There are those who are squeezing into the bodies of animals, eagles and leopards, and one trying on the skin of a monkey like a tight suit, ready to begin life in a more simple key, while others float off into some benign vagueness, little units of energy headed for the ultimate elsewhere. There are even a few being led to an underworld by a mythical creature with a beard and hooves, who will bring them to the mouth of a furious cave guarded over by Edith Hamilton and her three-headed dog. Do any of you know who Edith Hamilton is? She wrote about mythology and antiquities. The rest just lie on their backs in their coffins, wishing they could return so they could learn Italian or see the pyramids or play some golf in a light rain. They wish they could wake in the morning like you and stand at a window, examining the trees, looking out on another day. Actually, we're not going to do another practice right now. I want to check. I have a text from somebody that I asked about a quote that I wanted to get for today. So this, my friend Butch Schumann, who was a great benefactor of Inside LA, really an angel. He used to say, he was so funny, such a funny person. You know, some people just have that brain where the jokes pop out. Maybe you do, I don't. I can't even remember how to tell them, but this one I can remember because it's really short. I would call him and say, "How are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I read the obituaries today and I wasn't in them." He said, "I read them every morning to see if I'm there." So I asked his daughter, "How did he say that exactly?" Do you remember his exact way of saying it? She said, "I don't remember the exact words. Why don't you fudge the words to make the point?" Because it was so flippin' funny, as most of what he said was. Yeah, Butch died 2 years ago. His yard site was last week, July 21st. And he died the night that Jack and I moved into the apartment that he used to live in. And I don't think it was a coincidence.